You see the problem? You see the problem? Becoming tough in the sense that you've been hurt so badly you can't feel anything anymore is a way of life. It leaves you vulnerable to exploitation. I'm not sure she ever actually changed this. Hey. I am a survivor of SA and DV, and I am using that experience to read and comment upon Virginia Giuffre's Nobody's Girl, which talks about her time spent with Epstein as well as subsequent and previous events in her life. Today we're going to be talking about chapters 17 and 18, and the first passage is, "Remember who I was in 2002, a survivor of sexual abuse who'd spent years obediently performing intimate acts on men and women, some of them repeat abusers, some of them utter strangers, without any true feelings of closeness or affinity or desire. In fact, cutting myself off from my own wishes or wants had been one of my coping mechanisms. Even relationships with my past boyfriends had had a transactional quality. I had never been in love, not once, not with anyone. But now, almost instantly, I was falling in crazy love with Roberto Antonio Giuffre. In the tuk-tuk, I noticed that I liked the way his body felt next to mine, its temperature, its celerity, its warmth. I loved the way he smelled." I think it's fairly common for people to close off, to not feel emotions when they go through these things. I know I certainly did. And even once I exited the situations, I had real trouble understanding what I felt, or what I wanted, or anything else that is pretty instinctive for most people. You do eventually learn to turn yourself into an automata who simply does what other people want to preserve your safety and hopefully get you towards a better position to reach real safety instead of just mental and emotional safety. And that's hard to turn off when you enter the real world, but things seem to have turned out better for her on that front, at least if her account is accurate. Because she started feeling emotions for other people fairly quickly, which is excellent, actually. I took way longer, and I'm still not good at it, despite having done it for quite some time, but we all progress in different respects at different paces, and that's okay. On page 160, she says, "My understanding of loving and feeling loved was extremely limited. For so long, I'd only been seen as good if I did what was required of me, no matter how painful or upsetting. Now here came a man who claimed he didn't require me to do anything. He wanted me to be myself, he said. I didn't admit it to Robbie then, but it had been years since I knew who myself was. Part of me was stuck in time, as if still a little girl. I knew I felt safe with Robbie, though. And I hadn't experienced safety since I was 6 years old and sitting atop Alice being her horse." I just talked about some of that. And I talked about not feeling safe anywhere in therapy 2 days ago with my therapist. So, I think this is a pretty common reaction to abuse. People say that people who have addictions have part of themselves, or even their whole selves, certainly their coping mechanisms, frozen at the time when they started using. And I found that abuse is very similar. There are still times when I feel like a 4-year-old child in certain respects. It just kind of flashes back and I'm in that position again, which is quite disturbing when you're 10 times that age. But you learn to embrace it as part of you. Certainly the compulsion to obey, because obedience is the only thing you are allowed to do no matter how much it hurts. It's the only way you'll get any approval, no matter how much you hate it. I haven't been able to shake that myself. I'm not sure Virginia really did either, from what I do know about her life, but I hope she did a better job than I did. Because it's definitely still there. And it's extremely limiting. You feel like you need permission and instructions to do anything at all. That's actually seen in Virginia's story even later in life. She only really came forward because a reporter hunted her down, that reporter, for the Daily Mail. You can say a lot of things about the Daily Mail, and I do, but their investigative reporting is tenacious, and they consistently get the best pictures, and they often get stories before anyone else does. The editorializing around it is terrible. The sensationalization is ridiculous, but they are great for photos, especially for crime stories. They get them before anyone else, they get more than anyone else. Apparently because they harass people until they give them what they want, and they offer payment, which is very attractive to people who aren't doing well in particular. So yeah, it was a Daily Mail journalist who came up to her and talked her into sharing her story, and she's been doubted. She's had her credibility doubted ever since, because that's where she started. But legitimate reporters weren't harassing her and hammering down her door to get her to do what they wanted and to tell her story to them. So considering the passivity of victims, how much we are trained into just doing what we're told, I'm not at all surprised that's how it went. I know when I finally escaped my ex, it was only with the help of people who cared about me and kept berating me and encouraging me and berating me to get nearby help that I needed in order to actually leave. Without someone else pushing me into it, I'm not sure I ever would have. I wanted to. The only reason I was disobeying enough to talk to them was because I wanted to, but I don't think I would have. I needed permission, encouragement, reinforcement that yes, this is the right and good thing to do and staying is not. And we can be like that in every area of our lives because the conditioning is so strong and so deep and starts so early. And it sucks. I don't often see this discussed, but she talked about it. And I definitely know it, so there you go. Learned helplessness. That's the word for it. It has a word, and it's learned helplessness. You're helpless to escape, and you're helpless to make your own decisions with the most controlling abusers. And we see in the next paragraph that Virginia went through something very similar when she was rescued, when she left. Robbie asked me more questions about Epstein and Maxwell. How often did they check in on me? How soon was I expected to return to the United States? I remember I was crying as I told him I wasn't sure how I could ever break free from Epstein and Maxwell's web. But Robbie shook his head. You don't have to live that way, he said, taking my hand. Come back to Australia with me. A week into knowing each other, he dropped down onto one knee and proposed. You won't be rich, Robbie told me, but I will work hard to support you. I'll never hurt you, never betray you. I'll be here for you and always love you. I'll have your back until we die. I'd never thought I'd hear those words from anyone. And as I told him yes, happy tears ran down my cheeks. I love you too, I said. So yeah, I wasn't the only one who had to be saved by another person, specifically a man. It was also her story. I'd actually be genuinely curious to hear about anyone who had been that systematically disempowered, had that much agency taken from them, had their locus of control placed in such an exterior position for so long, and managed to flee on their own. Like, if you know any story like that, please let me know in the comments, because I really do want to know. The only other comment I want to place on that is that it does create a position of dependency. If the guy turns out to be hurtful himself, exploitative himself, then what do? Do you try to flee, or do you stay? I guess you better hope the person who saves you is worth it. Later, much later, right before death, revelations implied that he wasn't worth it. He also hurt her. But it doesn't always have to turn out that way. I had significantly better luck, for which I am grateful. So on page 162, we see that they went through a rapid marriage shortly after meeting. And what Virginia says about that, after, of course, the very sweet romantic details, is, when we flung ourselves on the bed, sending the rose petals flying, I had never felt so tethered to another human being. I only hoped I could make Robbie happy. You see the problem? You see the problem? You see the problem. Okay. So, she escaped, but she was still defending her worth by how happy she made someone else. Just like she'd been trained to do. And yes, also guilty. I think it might be inevitable. We only change patterns of behavior and the thoughts that accompany them slowly and gradually with very persistent and careful guidance from other people, or internally based on our own internal compass when we are aware that there's a problem. But I'm not sure she knew there was a problem. The virtue she saw, the happiness she pursued, seemed to be about helping other people. First, making her husband happy, then raising their kids well, and finally helping victims. And finally helping victims like me who had gone through similar things by going to the courts and trying to change the statute of limitations on things like CSA. That's a life of service, which that's extremely admirable, but it's not really what I want for her. I wanted her, I still wish she could have been happy living for herself, but I don't think the idea ever crossed her mind. She'd been too deeply conditioned into doing what others wanted, no matter how bad it hurt. And that pattern never went away. I still struggle with it too, as my partner points out to me. I think the thing he criticizes me for most is that I never actually think about my own needs, which means he's a good egg, but she describes officially leaving Epstein and Maxwell in the same chapter. I'm going to start on page 162 and it goes to 163. Our wedding day was almost over when I realized I had one more call to make. Robbie had made clear that he needed to hear me tell Epstein and Maxwell goodbye. He wanted that for himself, he said, but also for me. I had a right to assert myself, he said, to choose my own path. Robbie believed it would be good for me and for us if I said so out loud. I agreed with him in principle, but still I hesitated. Even with 8,000 miles between us, I was afraid of them. Finally, I dialed Epstein's cell phone. I felt a churning in my gut as I waited for him to answer. Would he yell? More likely, he'd threaten. I knew he would stop paying my way at the Royal Princess. Robbie and I were prepared for that. But could I truly sever my ties to the powerful people who'd ruled my life for more than 2 years? I still wasn't sure. A few tense moments passed before Epstein picked up. Hello, he said, and his voice, that smug Brooklyn growl, sounded impatient. I fell in love and got married, Jeffrey, I blurted out. I'm never coming back. There was the briefest pause. Have a great life, he said. Then a click. Epstein had hung up on me. We wouldn't speak again for more than 5 years. On a personal level, I find this interesting just because it's the opposite of what I did. She was very open about it. She did it vocally. She needed encouragement, but she did it. Meanwhile, the person who helped me escape discouraged me from telling my partner that I was leaving because he was worried that he would do something, which, not a crazy thought. However, I have kept written diaries for a long time, and he was apparently reading mine and found out that I planned on leaving. I didn't say a specific date that I would, but he did find out about it, so we wound up talking about it. And we had a long, impassioned conversation where I told him that, well, lots of sweet things I don't actually want to share here. But it was a powerful and intense evening. I wound up leaving the very next day, so the timing wasn't terrible, considering he didn't do anything that day. But yeah, polar opposite of what she did, just making a phone call. And it seemed like her instinct was not saying anything at all, which is exactly what the person who was helping me suggested that I do, and I did not listen to him. So, yeah. These things can go lots of different ways. That's all. Okay, now we're on chapter 18, Honeymooners. So, her husband, Robbie, was a spiritual type. At one point, I asked Robbie if he believed in God. God is like the wind, he said, explaining how reading about paganism had taught him to see God in nature. Can you see the wind? No, but you can feel it when it brushes your cheek. Did I believe in God? I couldn't answer that. I'd always been comforted by the idea of reincarnation because it promised that my piss-poor excuse for a life was not the only one I was going to get. But God, I wasn't sure. Hadn't Forrest, one of my earliest abusers, invoked God to manipulate me, just as the counselors at Growing Together had done? In my experience, God had been wielded by others to get what they wanted. Still, Meeting Robbie at the very moment I needed him most seemed the best evidence I'd ever had of the existence of something divine. So the stereotype of religious people by atheists is that people believe because it's comforting, it's comfortable, it makes them feel better. And she talks about one way that religion can make you feel better all by itself, by implying a life beyond what you already have, which is very appealing if you're in terrible circumstances. I think if you've been through abuse, you tend to be hyper aware of mistreatment, and the Bible and God is used that way a lot. It tells people how to live, how to think, what to do, what not to do, just the same way that abusers do. I love religion. I can't say that enough, and I think a lot of what religion teaches can be extraordinarily useful both for self-stabilization, for self-soothing, and for becoming a person that you're more proud of being. But it is also used for manipulation, and I think it makes sense to be wary of that, even if you long for the good aspects that you see in religion when you look at it. Another interest of her husband was martial arts and fighting in a competitive sense. Robbie told me, "You were not allowed to land a hit. You had to stop an inch away from your opponent's face. Instead of dominating them with force, you blocked their blows and let them wear themselves out. So that after a while, we couldn't feel anything. My body got conditioned to the point where if someone hit me, I'd just look at them and smile." I'd never set a foot inside a boxing ring, but I understood at least a version of what Robbie was talking about, shoring yourself up to increase the odds of your own survival. I'd spent my life blocking the blows of others, wishing they'd tire of abusing me. And at least for a while I'd gotten good at blotting out feelings while keeping a smile plastered on my face. Dissociation. Becoming tough in the sense that you've been hurt so badly you can't feel anything anymore is a way of life. It's not a desirable way of life, but a lot of us pick it up. It does have uses once you're actually using it through your own choice and for your own purposes. I think that's part of why I found certain types of meditation exceptionally easy to do, and I now use it so that I don't have to feel the chronic pain that my spine is constantly sending out, which otherwise would have me prone on the bed almost all the time because it just hurts that badly. But with dissociation, I can pull away from it and not feel that part of me, and therefore I can live a comparatively normal life. It's not perfect, it doesn't fix the problem, but it stops the problem from being as painful as it could be otherwise. Extremely valuable. But you don't want to use it to tolerate situations that are intolerable and changeable, like abuse. And so many of us do. So many of us did. So many still are. I wish that comfort for them, but I also wish an escape that makes that no longer necessary. So the last passage I wanted to talk about today was on page 172, and it talks about their flights home. There was one glitch in the plan. Robbie's parents had not been able to get me his direct flight, so we'd be traveling separately. My flight would leave a few hours earlier than his did and would connect through Singapore. Realizing this, I was filled with dread. I'd come to rely on how secure Robbie made me feel. Yeah. I wonder if it's even possible to leave these sorts of relationships without initially relying on codependent reassurance with another person who seems to care about you first. When you have no strength of your own, you need help from someone else. But allowing that to develop into codependency can lead to personal powerlessness in a short and long-term sense, which is not desirable. Leaning on someone while you're trying to get out, and even for some time afterwards, even forever for certain tasks, is great. There's a toxic independence nowadays that says that all leaning on other people is bad, and it's just not. It's not. Being vulnerable with another person, which is what leaning on them requires, is a way to forge a deep and resilient connection that gives both of your lives meaning, and it is not good to live without that type of interpersonal meaning. You end up feeling very alone. You may be happy, but you will be very alone and you will feel that loneliness. Most people, not all people. It's a pattern that I hope did not persist, because if it does, it leaves you vulnerable to exploitation by the person that you're leaning on, because you don't know what you would do without them in a very literal, immutable sense, a sense that you feel powerless to change. And the fact that she stayed with him until she reported his abuse of her, and he responded with a family restraining order, which is the action that led to her self-deletion. I'm not sure she ever actually changed this. And her story, how it ended, that's why it's not good. It's good to lean on others, but it is also good to know and believe and act upon the reality that you can rely on yourself. I don't think she ever learned that. I don't think she ever got there, and it makes me so sad and angry and frustrated. Abuse causes long-term harm. That's why it's so frustrating that CSA and similar offenses have incredibly minor punishments. These actions, these abuses, these types of mistreatment and manipulation, they kill people. Sure, they're most often killed by their own hand, but we can point directly to who's responsible for that. These crimes need to be taken more seriously. Alright, that's all we've got this time. The book slid down, but I'll be back with more chapters probably in about a week. Do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law. Love is the law, love under will.